I'd like to please welcome, it's my pleasure to welcome back the directors, Abbie Perreault and Maisie Crow. And the Molly Duane and Marc Hearron, who are the attorneys for the Center for Reproductive Rights. Dr. Chelsea Clinton. Come on down. Secretary Hillary Clinton. And our moderator, who is also the founder of the Joyful Heart Foundation, Mariska Hargitay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The first thing I want to say is what an incredible privilege it is to stand on this stage with these storms. I feel like we've just gone through a group grieving session, and that's what the film is in a way, and it's so much hope in a way. I think I can stand here with everyone and say our deepest thank you for making this film about humanity, this film about inhumanity. Our hearts, my heart, our hearts are so deeply with all of the women who are part of this lawsuit and all the people in the world, all the people in this country going through this, and watching the opening of a film and Amanda testifying before Congress, and while Lindsey Graham rolls his eyes, is rough, and the brutality that follows, and the inanity and the insanity that follows. And I think every single person should see this film. And I mean, if a child can figure it out, I think we should be able to figure it out. So I think my first question is to Molly, to quote Amanda, what the fuck do we do now? So, but we're going to get to that. Again, Molly, I just need to say, and all of you on this stage, you are truly the storms. You are the most beautiful storm I've ever seen. So, I know how we responded to this film. So, Maisie and Abbie, I really want to just ask you, how has this film been received?
Thank you all for being here, and thank you for that question. It's we had the great honor after we premiered in Telluride to screen it in Texas. Bumble, a few of you guys are here, were incredible to sponsor a screening. We filled the theater, and then the next night we rolled out 6 screenings across the country, impact screenings in Alamo Drafthouse, and they sold out immediately. I showed up to the screening in Austin expecting it to be a similar crowd to this, people who understand the issue and wanted to learn more about what was happening. What surprised me is Jonathan Stone, who you see in the Kate Cox argument on Zoom, arguing on behalf of the state, also showed up to that screening. And I think that speaks to the power of these stories and to the fact that the state of Texas is listening, and that with films like this, we really can make a change.
Yeah. There are so many intimate and extraordinarily vulnerable and brutal, just brutal moments in the film, and it seems like that we just weren't excluded from anything. And can you talk about the consent and the participation of the individuals in the film, particularly Samantha, obviously all of them, but particularly Samantha?
Sure. I'll let Abbie.
So I think, as you can see in this film, there's so much that relies on trust that's captured, and it's Molly trusting us to be with her. She's an attorney, so we expected her to slam the door in our face. And she did sometimes, yes, privileged conversations. But even more so the vulnerability of the women who decided to open their lives up to this court case, but then even more so, the vulnerabilities of the continuing traumas that they've gone through. And I think speaking with Amanda early on, we really, it clicked for us that this is about lives being impacted for a very long time, and not just the women themselves, but their partners, their families. This is trauma that lasts, and I think in the media you understand that they went through an acute trauma, and then through our film I think you see just how long of a tail it has. And particularly with Samantha, something that's amazing about all of these women is that they volunteered to tell their stories, and so we knew we were fortunate to come upon them at a moment where they were ready to share. And so with Samantha, we actually met her the eve of her daughter's funeral, and from the very beginning she was very adamant that she wanted us to show what was really happening, because she has had people to her face say, this isn't real, this is not happening. And she's like, I'm living proof, and you're gonna see it. So it's really thanks to their bravery more than anything that we were able to share these stories.
And I just need to comment on your brilliant filmmaking. There was staggering moments, the fragility, the tenderness, the highs and the lows, but it's such a ride that you take us on, such a brutal and hopeful ride. Also, the scene in particular, if I can just mark it, is when Samantha is talking to her husband about how she's going to have to miss work because she has to get her tubes tied, and then of course he's working on wires, fixing wires underneath the car. And when did you realize that our storm, Molly, was going to be a character alongside the plaintiffs?
I think from the moment we met Molly in person, we knew.
Yes.
Woo! I don't think Molly knew. I think Molly thought she was going to be in the background.
I thought I was very boring.
But as we went along on this journey and we realized that she threw everything, all of herself, into this work, and that the women in the film come to rely on her to really protect all of us, it just became so clear how important your story was to tell.
Yeah. So the word cruelty comes up a number of times in the film. And again, there's the inane and re-traumatizing questions that follow. So presumably, and the cruelty is actually so egregious, and I may be wrong about this, but the judges on the Texas Supreme Court and the Texas Medical Board and Ken Paxton and that lawyer, but I'm gonna let that go, and the Texas Attorney General, they don't get up in the morning. They don't get up in the morning and say, I want to be as cruel as I can be today. I want to lack humanity. I don't want to be a person. So what do you think is guiding their actions?
Oh, brother. Okay. Well, I mean, first of all, I just have to say, right, it was kind of an insane thing for attorneys to do, to let you all in this way. And First, I had to be brought along, and then I had to bring Marc along, who is the brilliant leader of the legal strategy, to make sure that we weren't going to do anything that was going to harm the litigation. And we found ways to do that, right? I sent you into the hallway of my house many times. But what was so important to us was first, for our clients' stories to be out there, and then second, for the world to see what we have seen way before Roe v. Wade was overturned, but this sort of deep mistrust of women and families and insensitivity to their pain. And after years of doing this work, as you mentioned, there are a lot of us in the room here today who have done this work for a long time, and it's hard to express to other people unless you were there to see it. And so I think it was very validating for us, for other people to bear witness to what, in our minds is so cruel and so difficult to observe. But, you know, I can't speak to their motivations. I've said that many times before. I know that they believe they're on a crusade of some kind, but you know, I just want the public to see and to understand what abortion bans really mean in real people's lives and how the states that have enacted these bans behave when faced with those stories. So Marc, do you want to add anything?
I'm not sure that some of them don't wake up every morning thinking, how can I be cruel today? Yeah, I don't have that much to add other than, you know, there was a moment on, you didn't see the state's expert on the stand during the trial, and, you know, she testified that, you know, look, for someone who has a diagnosis of anencephaly, it's much better for them to give birth and to hold their baby and grieve with their baby. And I had to ask her, so you're telling me that you know better than Samantha Cassiano that she and her family are not in the best position to make the decision about what's better for them. You know, she will endure both mental and physical trauma for the rest of her life because of what she was put through. It is just so abundantly cruel. I don't know of a better word for it.
Okay. And one of the most, one of the highlights and the most optimistic moments in the film was highlighting the judge's humanity in that first ruling. How was that? Tell us a little bit about that moment for you, Molly.
So I'm going to give a disclosure that Marc and I work for a 501c3 organization, nonprofit, and so I am not speaking in my official capacity. This is my personal opinion, and it's just facts. Same. All of those judges are elected. The district court judges are elected in Texas, as well as the Texas Supreme Court justices. And so I think seeing that just shows how important it is to research down ballot races and to understand who you're voting for at every level.
Thank you. That's right. So where does this case stand following the Texas Supreme Court ruling? And what can be done in Texas now that the Texas Supreme Court has refused to clarify, right, the medical exception? So talk to me about this, the clarity or the lack thereof, and the language, because when the lawyer argues that only harm will come to the state, nobody knows how to metabolize that. That only harm will occur, the only harm that will occur will be to the state. How are they justifying that ruling?
So the Texas Supreme Court's decision came out earlier this year. I've lost all sense of time. End of May. And the decision really did not provide very much additional clarity. The law is written, the exceptions are written in such a way that physicians do not understand them. And I just, put yourself in the position of a physician who is trained for many years, decades. Physicians are not trained to try to understand the meaning of obscure laws. The exceptions are written using non-medical terminology. So if you show a doctor, they don't know what a serious risk means. They don't know exactly what a life-threatening physical condition means. Living is a life-threatening physical condition, right? Everything could be a life-threatening condition if it's not treated. So, the language is written in such a vague way, and yet, if the doctors provide care, part of the language is reasonable medical judgment. Well, that sounds so reasonable. Reasonable medical judgment. But what reasonable medical judgment means, legally speaking, is that it's an objective standard. So if a doctor makes a decision, another doctor could come back along, or a prosecutor, or someone suing under SB 8, or the Texas Attorney General could say, I don't think your decision was reasonable. And now it's an objective standard. And they are subjected to being second-guessed. And if they're wrong, they could spend the rest of their lives, literally 99 years in prison. hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines, and loss of their medical license. So in the face of all of that, doctors understandably are terrified. And they may think that something might likely fall within the exception, but are they really going to take that risk? You know, doctors are trained to intervene and to provide care before people get to the point where they're on the brink of death, before there's a risk of death or some serious risk to their health, of a substantial impairment to a major bodily function, which again is not medical terminology. No one knows what is a major bodily function versus a minor bodily function, a substantial impairment versus an insubstantial impairment. These are not things anyone understands. So for doctors to be told by the law, you have to wait. And then at some point, maybe you'll feel comfortable enough intervening. It's just, the situation is really, it's intolerable. And even the state's expert admitted this. She said that the doctors in her hospital are terrified and that it is the blind leading the blind in their hospital because no one knows what to do. So what do? The Texas Supreme Court, in its decision, which didn't really provide much clarity, punted it to the Texas Medical Board. You saw the hearing in front of the Texas Medical Board and said, you can provide some clarity. And we submitted some things to the Texas Medical Board, and they basically punted as well. They just repeated some things that came out of some court decisions, but didn't actually say, this condition you can provide an abortion for, this condition you can't. And that's what doctors need, is some clarity. So, what can people do? Well, it's October. I'll leave it at that.
Chelsea and Secretary Clinton, well, this is for both of you. Well, I'm going to give you mine. This is going to be great. Okay. First of all, I thank you so much for everything that you've done for us. And everything that you continue to do. Somehow they have more hours in the day. But I wanted, Chelsea, for you to talk a little bit about the power of bearing witness. And Secretary Clinton, if you would share with us your hopes for the film.
Well, I'll pick up where Marc left off. It's not only October, it's October 5th. Right, so we're a month away from Election Day, and we know people are already voting in many states, and that access to abortion is on the ballot in 10 states.
Including New York.
Including New York. So this is relevant to us here as well. And I think, Mariska, the power in bearing witness is already what we've heard so potently from Abbie and Maisie and Molly and Marc. It is both about kind of bearing witness to the trauma that women and their families and their communities in our country is enduring because politicians have decided that they know better than physicians, and that we have politicized what should fundamentally be a patient and a public health issue. It also, though, I think is important to give real kind of stature and standing and gratitude and inspiration, to Molly and Marc and to the lawyers who are doing this work every day. And couldn't do this work with such kind of nobility and effectiveness if they didn't also absorb some of that trauma. And I think that is also true for our extraordinary filmmakers, Abbie and Maisie, who've been working on this, for more than 2 years. They were already working for years before the Dobbs decision to help bear witness to the extreme challenges in states that had made it almost impossible to access abortion or just good old-fashioned health care for women. And I hope, well, you didn't ask me about my hopes, but I hope too that this film not only informs people about the importance of voting in every election, from kind of president all the way down to local judge races, but also inspires people to run for office, go to medical school, go to law school, and also become documentary filmmakers. Because we need all of this kind of ecosystem to continue to bear witness, but also then to inform hearts and minds, and hopefully then kind of change how people think about issues that are not abstract, but really see themselves and kind of have a sense of human solidarity. And the last thing I'll say, for handing the microphone over to my mother, is that it's been quite extraordinary to watch what's been happening in France, and that Giselle Pigot had to effectively push for her own trauma to be in a courtroom because she didn't want people to look away from what had happened to her. It is unconscionable that in 2024, not only here in the United States, but around the world, women have to continue to fight to even have our own stories and our own trauma be borne witness to. This should be inexcusable. It is certainly inexplicable, and I think it is undeniably barbaric, as the person shouted from the audience. And so I think for us, it's important that this is an American story because it is rather uniquely American, the weaponization of cruelty against women in our country. But it's also a universal story until it no longer is. And so for me, I'm so proud to be a very small part of this, but it's most important to me as a mom of a daughter and sons, because I want them to live in a radically different world.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I hope this film gets a distributor. And, you know, when we premiered it at Telluride, the audience reaction was exactly as you're exhibiting here. People flooded up to us to talk about it. We did 2 panels, one right after the film and then one out in a park where the general public who couldn't see the film could actually hear the discussion of it. The reviews have been great, thanks to the wonderful filmmakers on this stage. But there is a reluctance, to pick up on what Chelsea just said, to actually look in the faces of women who are being denied care for their health and their lives. So where are we now? We have 2 verified deaths in Georgia of 2 women who were refused care. We have thousands and thousands of women. I mean, if Molly and Marc were to bring a national case, they could have tens of thousands of plaintiffs who have gone through but survived, perhaps losing their fertility like Amanda, being scarred emotionally and physically by what they went through. But they could have tens of thousands of plaintiffs in all the states that are denying care. We have tens of thousands of women who have been raped in the states denying care.
65,000 as of January.
65,000 who are being forced to bear the child of their rapist. So this is the kind of larger picture, but people hear the statistics and still kind of turn away from them. So we need more stories, and that's why this film is so critically important, because there have been, of course, other films about abortion, but this is the only film about the impact of the bans. And that's the world in which we are living, because there will be, if this election doesn't go the way that freedom, democracy, humanity, kindness, and compassion hope it does, then we could have a national abortion ban, and don't let anybody try to tell you otherwise. That is in the agenda of Project 2025. It is the agenda of many of the people supporting the Republican nominee. I have no compunctions about speaking politically, because that's where we are. If we don't stop this tide of cruelty, oppression, dismissiveness, and eye-rolling about women and women's lives, it will lead to exactly what we saw in this movie across our country, despite us living in a state where we think our rights are safe, vis-a-vis a national agenda and a court that will do whatever it can to get to the result its most conservative members want. So it's not just thinking about the election in a month at the presidential level. We have to elect Democrats to the Senate and the House right here in New York, and there's a great Democrat running in Suffolk County, John Avlon, to go to the House. So I feel as strongly as I can that it's all on the line. And we want this film to be seen by as many people as possible. We do have an impact campaign. We have a website up now, ZURAWSKI-V-TEXAS.com, where we're going to be showing, and we're showing this film, as you heard, in places like Dallas and Austin, and we're showing it in St. Louis because abortion's on the ballot in Missouri.
We're showing it in Miami because it's on the ballot in Florida.
Absolutely, and but we would like a much bigger audience because we want to reach voters who are not yet aware or convinced that this is actually happening. It's hard to believe the level of cruelty, and I would hope that people understand deeply that this is not about somebody else. This is about all of us. Because if you have authorities in states that begin to restrict rights, and not just the rights of women, but the rights of physicians to practice medicine according to their conscience and the standards that should apply, there's no telling what's next. So this film has the potential to tell a story that millions of Americans need to see and hear.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All of you are a stellar team. And the other thing I just want to add is, again, Maisie and Abbie, you did something so difficult, which was to build this story in 90 minutes to help us understand something very complicated and help us metabolize it. And you are wonderful, wonderful, wonderful filmmakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mariska.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Beautiful.